She's yours then, and the bay is mine, and let no man say Barnaby Wynne haggles. The words carried across the market square at Marbury Cross the way a dropped plate carries across a silent hall, and Lucian, Duke of Amberton, standing in the shadow of the corn cross with his hat low and his gloves in his hand, turned his head and understood, in the space of a single breath, that he had just heard a man sell his own daughter for a horse. He had come for grain prices. He had come, in truth, to be nobody for 1 hour, to stand among carters and cheesemongers with his carriage left behind at the Rose and Crown, to hear what the county said when it did not know a duke was listening. He had heard about the wheat, he had heard about the tolls. And now he heard a coarse voice laughing, and the ring of a bridle, and the flat, ugly sound of a bargain being struck over a woman's head as though she were a bale of wool. She stood beside the horse trough with her hands folded in front of her. That was the thing Lucian would remember afterward, when he could not sleep for remembering it. Not the laughing, not the crowd, which had drawn back into a loose ring the way crowds do when something shameful is happening and no one wishes to be the first to say so. Her hands, folded, quiet, the fingers reddened by work and cold water, resting one upon the other at her waist as though she were waiting for a service to begin. Her gown was grey wool gone the colour of ash, the hem torn and mended and torn again. Her shawl was thin, her chin was level. She was not weeping. She was not pleading. She was looking straight ahead over the heads of the people who had come to watch her disgrace, and she was keeping her face still, and Lucian, who had commanded men and buried a brother and sat in the Lords while grown peers shouted, had seldom seen anything require so much courage. "Come here, girl," said the man who had bought her. Josiah Craik was a horse dealer, and he had the look of one who had prospered by selling animals worse than he described them. He was broad through the shoulder and broader through the belly, with a coat of good cloth badly kept and a face that had been reddened by weather and something stronger. He held the bay gelding's leading rein in one fist. With the other he beckoned, twice, the way a man calls dog to heel. "Come here. Let's have a look at what I've paid for." "Her name," said the woman by the trough, "is Hester Wynne." She said it evenly. She said it to the crowd, not to Craik, as if she meant them to have it, to carry it home, to remember that the thing being traded in their market had a name. A murmur went along the ring of faces. Nobody moved. Lucian moved. He did not hurry. He had learned long ago that a man who hurries invites argument, and a man who arrives without hurrying invites obedience, and he wanted no brawl in a market square with a woman standing in the middle of it. He walked out of the shadow of the corn cross into the low autumn sun, and the light caught the silver head of his stick and the plain heavy gold of the signet on his hand, and the crowd parted in front of him because crowds always do, and he was aware, coldly, usefully, that the parting itself was worth more than any words he could have shouted. By the time he reached the trough, the square had gone quiet enough to hear the bay gelding shift its feet. "Wynne," Lucian said. Barnaby Wynne had been counting the horse's teeth with a proprietor's greed. He straightened, and the greed slid off his face and was replaced by the cringing, calculating brightness of a man who has recognized fine broadcloth and does not yet know what it wants. He was a lean man with a handsome ruin of a face, the sort who'd been the best-looking fellow in the village 30 years ago, and had never troubled to become anything else. "Your Grace," he said, and pulled his hat off, and elbowed Craik to do the same. "Your Grace, this is an honour, that's what it is, an honour. We'd no notion—" "No," Lucian agreed. "You had no notion." He let that sit for the length of 2 heartbeats. Then he said, quite pleasantly, so that it reached the back of the crowd, "Say it again." Wynne blinked. "Say, Your Grace?" "What you said when you struck your bargain. You said it loudly enough a moment ago. Say it again now. Now with the whole of Marbury Cross attending, and with me attending, and let us all be quite certain what was meant." Lucian turned his head very slightly. "Or shall I say it for you? You have exchanged your daughter, a free Englishwoman of age, baptized in that church behind you, for a 5-year-old bay gelding with a splint on the near fore that this man has been trying to move since Michaelmas. Is that the sum of it?" Somebody in the crowd laughed. It was not a kind laugh, and it was not aimed at Hester Wynne, and Lucian felt the whole balance of the square tip at that sound, the way a scale tips, away from the girl at the trough, and onto the 2 men beside her. Craik's jaw set. "Bargain's a bargain," he said. "Made fair." before witnesses. Before witnesses, Lucian said. Yes, that is what troubles you, though you do not know it yet. He looked at the horse dealer without any particular heat. There is no law in England, Mr. Craik, by which a man may sell a woman, not for a horse, not for a guinea, not for the crown of France. What you have done here before 40 people is announce your intention to take a woman by force and keep her against her will. If you had done it quietly, you might have hoped to go unremarked. You have done it in a market square at noon at the top of your voice. He let his gaze travel, unhurried, over the watching faces. Half the parish will swear to it. I shall swear to it. And I sit on the bench at Amberton, and I am tolerably certain the magistrate at Marbury dined at my table in June. The red went out of Craik's face in patches, leaving it the colour of tallow. Now, Lucian said, the horse, the horse, your grace, your bay. You brought it here to sell. You shall sell it, and to me, and for money, as horses are properly sold. He drew out his purse, and the crowd craned, and he counted the coins into his gloved palm with the deliberation of a man laying out cards. 30 guineas. Which is 9 more than the beast is worth, and I will thank you not to argue, because the 9 are not a kindness. They are the price of your leaving this square within the quarter hour and never troubling Miss Wynne's name again. If I hear it in your mouth, I shall have that 9 guineas back out of you in a courtroom, with your reputation for interest. Do we understand one another? Craik looked at the coins. He looked at the Duke. Something went out of him, the swagger, the ownership, the ugly certainty, and what was left was only a fat, frightened man in a dirty good coat holding a rein. Aye, he said thickly. Say it so she can hear it. Craik's throat worked. He did not look at her. I've no claim, he said. There's no bargain. I've no claim on Miss Wynne. Louder. I've no claim on her. It came out of him in a bellow, and the square rang with it, and the bay gelding threw up its head, and Craik shoved the leading rein into the hand of Lucian's groom, who had come up unbidden and unhurried at his master's shoulder, and took the coins and went. The crowd let him through and closed behind him and did not laugh again, because it had stopped being funny to them, and that, Lucian thought, was the only decent thing the town had done all morning. Then he turned to Barnaby Wynne. He did not raise his voice at all. That was worse, and he knew it was worse, and he did it deliberately. You will not be prosecuted, Lucian said, because the law is a blunt instrument, and it would put your daughter's name in the newspapers to make an example of you, and her name is not currency, and I will not spend it. Understand me, you are not spared. You are simply not worth the cost of the ruin, and so you will carry the ruin about with you instead, and it will cost you more. Wynne had gone grey. Your Grace, she's my daughter. I've a father's rights. You had a father's duty, Lucian said. You have this morning informed the entire county precisely what you did with it. He glanced briefly at the crowd, at the baker with flour on his sleeves, at the woman with the egg basket, at the 2 farmers who had stopped haggling with their mouths open. These are your neighbours, Mr. Wynne. They will remember. They will remember when you want credit at the corn chandler's, and when you want a bed at the inn, and when you want a man to stand up with you at the vestry meeting. You have made yourself a thing that respectable people do not care to be seen speaking to. That is not my doing. That is yours, and it took you less than a minute, and it will take you the rest of your life. He turned away from him then, entirely, as one turns away from a wall. And he found that the hardest part of the morning was still in front of him, and that it was 3 feet away, and that it was looking at him with grey eyes that had not once, in the whole of it, asked him for anything. Close to, she was younger than he had thought, and more tired. There was a bruise of sleeplessness under each eye. Her hair had been dressed that morning with real care, plaited and pinned, by someone who owned no maid and no glass worth the name, and something about that care, that she had risen and made herself neat before being taken to market, went through Lucian like a blade. He removed his hat. The square saw him do it. He meant the square to see him do it. Miss Wynne, he said, my name is Amberton. I ask your pardon for speaking of you as though you were not standing here. It could not be helped, and it will not happen again. She did not curtsy. Her chin stayed level. You bought the horse, she said. Her voice was low and clear, and it shook only a very little at the edges, the way a held note shakes. You did not buy me. Lucian said, I did not. I could not have. There is nothing in this square, nor in my house, nor in the whole of my estate, of a value to be set against you, and if there were, I hope I should have burnt it before I offered it. He heard himself say it, and knew it for the plainest truth he had spoken in 10 years, and did not take it back. You are not obliged to me, Miss Wynne. You are not obliged to anyone here. You may walk out of this square this moment, in whatever direction you please, and I will see that no man follows you. Something moved behind her eyes then, the first thing that had moved in them since he had come out of the shadow. And if I have nowhere to walk to, she said. It was not a plea. Lucian had heard a great many pleas in his life and knew the shape of them. This was a question put by a woman who had done sums in her head and found the answer wanting, and who wished to know, quite practically, whether the man in front of her intended to make her a fool as well as a spectacle. Then you would allow me to be of use to you, he said, which is a different thing from being obliged to me, and I would ask you to mark the difference, because I shall keep to it. Your Grace speaks very finely. My Grace has been speaking finely for 20 years and has very little to show for it, Lucian said. Let us be plain instead. My aunt, Lady Corvin, keeps house for me at Thornley. She is 71, she is losing her sight. She has driven off 4 companions in 2 years by being too clever for them, and she is at this moment sitting in a cold morning room refusing to be read to by a footman. The wage is £30 a year, paid quarterly into your own hand, and you may leave upon a week's notice on any day you choose and go with a character in writing from me. There is a lock on the door of the room you would have, and the key of it would be yours, and no one in my house would ever ask you for it. He paused. That is the whole of the offer. There is no other part of it. If you suspect there is, refuse me, and be right too. The wind came across the square and lifted the frayed end of her shawl. And if I refuse, Hester said, and take nothing? Then Mrs. Ledger at the Rose and Crown will give you a bed and a meal tonight and every night for a fortnight, at my charge, which she will not tell you is at my charge, and you will look about you and choose your own road, and I shall never know which one you took. He put his hat back on. That stands whether you come to Thornley or not. It is not a lure. It is the least a man may do who has watched a thing like this happen in his own county and been too slow to prevent it. She looked at him for a long moment. Behind her, the crowd had begun at last to be ashamed of itself and to disperse. A woman with an egg basket had come near enough to be within reach, and hovered, and did not quite dare. £30, Hester said, is a great deal for reading aloud. My aunt is a great deal of woman. And there, for the space of half a second, and then gone, was the ghost of something at the corner of her mouth. It was not a smile. It was the place a smile had been once, before it had been trained out of her. Lucian felt it in his chest like a hand laid flat. I will come, she said. For a quarter, and I will take the wage, all of it, and I will earn it, and if Lady Corvin finds me wanting she is to say so, and I will go without a word. She will say so, Lucian said. She says everything. Good, said Hester Wynne. She turned then and looked once, only once, at her father, who stood by the empty place where the horse had been with his hat still in his hands, and Lucian watched her look at him, and watched her decide quite visibly not to speak. It was the most complete dismissal he had ever witnessed. Barnaby Wynne had come to the market with a daughter and gone away with neither daughter nor horse nor name, and had cost him 1 minute and his whole life, and he had done every particle of it himself. Lucian offered her his arm. She did not take it. She walked beside him across the square with her hands folded and her chin level, exactly as she had stood, and the town of Marbury Cross fell back on either side to let her pass, and some of them, God be thanked, pulled off their hats. He had the bay gelding led home behind the carriage. He did not know, then, why he had insisted on buying the animal outright rather than simply frightening Craik out of the county. He only knew that the horse had been the price of her, and that he wanted the price of her in his own stable, where he could look at, so that he should never once be tempted to think well of himself for what he had done that morning. Thornley Hall stood 4 miles east of the town, long and grey and honest, with a beech avenue that had been planted by a duke who had never lived to walk under it. Lucian had been born there and had spent 11 years contriving reasons not to be. It was too large for one man. It was far too large for one man who did not intend to marry, and he had not intended to marry since the year his brother died, and left him a title he had never wanted and a great deal of advice about duty from people who had none. He watched Hester Wynne step down from the carriage and look up at the front of his house, and he waited for the calculation he had seen on 100 faces, the swift, greedy taking of inventory, the reckoning of windows. She was not counting the windows. She was looking at the beeches. They were planted too close, she said. So the head gardener informs me, every year, since I was 9. He is right, said Hester, and went up the steps. Lady Corvin took to her within the hour, which Lucian had not dared to expect, and did it by being so extravagantly rude that he was obliged to leave the room. You have a Market Square scandal about you, girl. The whole county will have it by Friday. Yes, my lady. Are you going to weep about it? No, my lady. Why not? Because it happened to me, Hester said, and not to them, and if I weep they will think it was theirs to have an opinion of. There had been a silence. Then his aunt had said, sit down and read me the paper, and do not skip the shipping, and Lucian had shut the door very quietly and stood in the passage with his hand still on the handle for longer than he could afterward account for. The autumn went on. It went on quietly, which was the strangest part of it, because Lucian had braced himself for a house in uproar and found instead a house that had begun, imperceptibly, to work. It began with the newspaper and the shipping. It went on to the letters, because Lady Corvin's eyes could no longer manage a crossed page and Hester's hand turned out to be small, upright and clear as print. It went on to the household books, because on a wet Thursday in November the housekeeper laid the quarter's accounts before Lady Corvin, and Lady Corvin, who could not see them, said, read me the totals, and Hester read the totals and then said, in a voice of considerable calm, the totals are wrong, my lady. Lucian, passing the door, stopped. Wrong, said his aunt. The candles are entered twice. Once in September under chandlery and once in October under sundries, and the sum is carried forward from the wrong column, so the quarter shows £4.11 more spent than has been spent. A pause. It is not dishonesty. It is the same error in the same place in every quarter of this book, going back, a sound of pages, 3 years at least. Somebody was taught his columns badly and has been faithful to the teaching. And you can see that, said Lady Corvin, by having it read to you once. I can see it because I kept my father's accounts from the age of 11, Hester said, and there was never anything in them but subtraction. Lucian went away from the door without going in. He found himself in the weeks after contriving to be in rooms. It was ridiculous, and he knew it was ridiculous. He was a man of 38 who had faced down a cabinet minister across a dinner table, and he was arranging his mornings so as to pass the library at the hour when the light was good enough for her to write in it. He told himself it was the accounts. There was, in fairness, a great deal in the accounts. By Christmas she had gone back through 9 years of the Thornley books with a ruler and a pencil, and found £430 that had drained away into an honest man's bad arithmetic. And she laid the whole of it before Lucian in a fair copy, and stood while he read it, with her hands folded. You will want to dismiss Mr. Pargeter, she said. Shall I? No, said Hester. He is 63 and he has served you since your father's time, and the fault is that nobody ever taught him. Set him to the rents where he is careful and slow and does no harm, and give the books to whoever can keep them, and let him keep his name. A man's name is the whole of what he has. Lucian looked at the page. He did not, for a moment, trust his voice. You are describing yourself, he said at last. I am describing Mr. Pargeter. Miss Wynne. He set the paper down. Your father took your name into the Market Square at Marbury Cross and offered it about like a bad shilling, and you have spent 3 months in this house behaving as though it were the finest thing in England, and it is, and you appear to be the only person who does not know it. The room was very quiet. Rain moved on the window. She said, You should not say such things to me. No, Lucian said, I should not, because I am paid £30 a year, she said, out of your hand. And whatever I said, and whatever I felt, no one would ever be able to tell whether I'd said it freely. Her chin came up. It was the Market Square again. It was the trow and the folded hands and the level look. And it undid him now as it had undone him then. You have been very careful of me, your grace. Be careful of that too. He stood there with the rain on the glass and understood that she had just told him, in the most courteous language available to her, that he held every card at the table, and that a decent man would therefore not play. "You are right," he said. "I ask your pardon. It will not happen again." And he kept it. Through the whole of that winter he kept it, and it was the hardest thing he had ever done, and he did not once let her see the cost. The county talked, of course. It talked all through Advent, and it was still talking at Candlemas, and Lucian, who had spent his life being talked about and had never once cared, discovered that he cared now with a violence that astonished him. He heard it at the Marbury Assembly, where Mrs. Fenimore of Colt's Barrow said, behind her fan and not nearly softly enough, that it was a very odd sort of charity that housed a girl of that history under a bachelor's roof, and he crossed the room and stood in front of her and said, pleasantly, that Lady Corvin was in residence at Thornley, that Lady Corvin had buried 2 husbands and was reckoned the most censorious woman in 3 counties, and that if Mrs. Fenimore wished to be understood as calling his aunt an unfit chaperone, she should say so in words of 1 syllable, and he would carry them to her himself. Mrs. Fenimore did not wish to be so understood. The talk did not stop, but it changed its shape and dropped its voice, and after Christmas it began grudgingly to concern itself with other people's daughters. He heard it from his own steward, who wished to know delicately whether Miss Wynne's authority over the books was to be considered permanent. "It is to be considered correct," Lucian said. "That is a great deal rarer. Answer to her as you would to me." And he heard it, in the end, from Barnaby Wynne. The man came up the beach avenue on a February afternoon, in a coat that had been good 3 winters ago, and asked at the door for the Duke and was shown, because Lucian had left orders that he should be shown, having always preferred to meet a thing coming into the great hall, where he stood on the flags and turned his hat in his hands and looked, with a slow greedy sweep at the height of the ceiling. Lucian came down the stairs and did not offer him a chair. "Your Grace." Wynne ducked his head. He had thinned. There was a rawness about him, the look of a man who has been refused at several doors. "Your Grace, a father's heart. Say what you have come to say." Wynne wetted his lips. "It's been put to me," he said, "by them as know the world, that a gentleman in your position might not care to have it said about the county that he keeps a young woman at Thornley for reading aloud. And I'm her father, and it's my name too, and my name's suffered, sir. There's not a man in Marbury will take my hand. The corn chandler will not give me credit. They have put me off the vestry." He looked up, and there was a wine in it, and underneath the wine there was a shrewdness that was worse. "Now, I'm a reasonable man. I'd not make trouble. But a settlement as it were, on the family, and I'd go north, and there'd be no talk, and no father coming to any door, and everything quiet." The hall was very cold. Somewhere above, a door opened and did not close. "Let me be certain of your meaning," Lucian said, "since you have twice now had difficulty saying a thing plainly in front of witnesses. You are proposing to sell me your silence concerning your daughter's honour, an honour which is entire, and which no one in England has assailed but you, and you have named no figure yet because you are waiting to see what I look like when I am frightened." He came down the last stair. "You are not going to see it. Your Grace, you have come to the wrong house with the wrong trade. You made that error once already in a market square, in front of 40 people, and I am obliged to tell you that you are not learning." Lucian's voice did not rise. It never rose. "Here is what will happen. I have this morning had a letter from a shipping agent at Bristol. There is a place found for you in the counting-house of a wool merchant at Kirkbride, 300 miles north of here, where nobody has heard your name, and where you will earn £60 a year by keeping accounts, which I understand is work your daughter did for you from the age of 11 while you drank the difference. The place is honest. The wage is honest. It is not charity, and it is not a settlement, and there is no lump of money in it, now or ever, because a lump of money is what came for, and you shall not have what you came for in this house. You may take it, and work, and be a man of small respectable obscurity. Or you may refuse it and stay, and be exactly what Marbury Cross already believes you to be. It is entirely as you please, but you will never again ask for money on your daughter's account of me or of any man. Because if you do, the letters I hold from Josiah Craik and from 11 other witnesses of that morning go to every attorney, and every parish and every newspaper between here and the sea. And then you will not be a man with an ugly story. You will be the ugly story. Do you understand me? Barnaby Wynne stood in the middle of the great hall of Thornleigh, in his 3-year-old coat, and understood. "She's my daughter," he said. It came out thin. "She is not," said a voice from the stairs. Lucian turned. Hester stood on the half-landing with the household ledger still open against her arm, and she was not pale and she was not trembling, and Lucian thought, with a kind of despair, that he had never in his life wanted so much to go up a staircase. "You had a daughter," Hester said, "and you took her to market, and you found her a price. It was a bay gelding with a splint on the near fore. You may go and look at him if you like. He is in the 3rd box, and he is very well, and he cost 30 guineas, and he is the only thing in this world that has ever told you the truth about yourself." She came down 2 steps. "I am not angry with you. I have tried, and I cannot manage it any more. There is nothing there to be angry at. Take the place at Kirkbride. Keep the books straight. It is the one thing you were ever any good at, and you never once did it sober." Her voice did not break. "And do not come here again. Not because I am afraid of you, because I am done, and the door is shut, and it was you who shut it." He went. He did not go north that week, but he went north in the end, and the wool merchant at Kirkbride reported him serviceable and dull, and Lucian read the report twice a year and never spoke of it, and the door at Thornleigh stayed shut. The bay gelding stayed in the 3rd box, and that was a harder thing. Lucian found her there in March, in the blue dark before supper, standing at the half-door with her hand flat on the horse's neck. He had not meant to the stables. He had been coming to the stables at this hour for a month, and he had run out of ways of pretending he had not. "He is a good horse," she said, without turning. "That is the injustice of it. He is patient, and he is kind, and he has done nothing, and I cannot look at him. Then he shall be sold." "No." Her hand moved along the dark coat. "No. Then it would have been for nothing." She was quiet a moment. "I only wish he had a name that was not the one Craik gave him. Then name him." She thought about it for a long time, with the stable warm and dim around them, and the lantern hung on its nail, throwing her shadow up the whitewashed wall. "Michaelmas," she said. For the day the world ended and did not. Lucian discovered that he could not immediately speak. He had come out to the stables that evening with a thing in his coat pocket and a speech in his head, and he had rehearsed the speech on horseback, in the estate office, and once disgracefully, before his own glass. It went now entirely out of his mind, and what remained was only the truth, which he had never found any use for until this winter. "Miss Wynne," he said, "there is a paper in my pocket, and before I say anything else to you, you must have it and read it, and I will go away while you do." She turned. "What is it?" "It is a deed. It settles upon you, absolutely and without condition, £430, the sum you found in 9 years of my books, which is your finding and not mine, invested in the funds in your own name. To be yours, whether you remain in this house or leave it tonight, whether you speak to me tomorrow or never speak to me again. It cannot be revoked. It is signed and witnessed, and my attorney has the counterpart, and he is a disobliging man who would take great pleasure in enforcing it against me." He held it out. "There is also a letter from Lady Corvin's cousin, who is a widow of consequence in Bath, and who wants a companion, and will pay £50 a year, and thinks herself lucky. My aunt wrote it without my asking, and I did not know of it until Tuesday, and I have not opened it, and it is not my business what it says." Hester took the papers. She did not look at them. She looked at him. "Why?" she said. "Because you told me, in the library in November, that whatever you said and whatever you felt, no man would ever be able to tell whether you had said it freely." Lucian's hands were unsteady. He put them behind his back. "You were right. You were entirely right, and it has been the ruin of my peace, and there was only one way to mend it, which was to make you free first and ask afterwards. So you are free. You have money that is not mine to take back, and a position that is not mine to give, and you may walk out of this stable and out of my gate tonight exactly as you might have walked out of that square, and it would cost you nothing, and I would see that no man followed you." He took a breath. "And now that it can cost you nothing, now that there is not one thing left in the world that you could gain by sayest to me," Hester, I am asking. Marry me. The lantern hissed. Michaelmas shifted in the straw. She looked down at the papers in her hands, and then she folded them, very carefully, the way she folded everything, and set them on the ledge of the half-door. You have been 3 months not touching my hand, she said. 4, said Lucian. It has been 4. And then she was crossing the 2 feet of straw between them, and her hand reddened, capable the hand that had been folded at her waist, while a man weighed her against a horse, came up and lay flat against his coat, over his heart, and stayed there. Yes, said Hester Wynne. He put his own hand over hers and bowed his head, and for a while neither of them said anything at all, and it was the first entirely quiet moment of Lucian's life. They were married at Amberton in April, in the small church with the crooked spire, because she would not be married at Marbury Cross, and he never once asked her to be. Lady Corvin wept, denied weeping, and told 9 separate people that she had arranged the entire thing. The village came. The head gardener came, and told the new Duchess in confidence that the beeches had indeed been planted too close, and that he had said so for 30 years, and that it was a great comfort to be believed. She kept the books. She kept them for 40 years, and the Thornley accounts became, in that time, a thing the neighbouring estates sent their agents to look at, and Mr. Pargeter died at 80 in his own cottage with his name intact and his rents in perfect order. She never went back to Marbury Cross. She never had to. The town came to her in the end, hat in hand, over the matter of a bridge, and she gave them the bridge and said nothing whatever about the square, and on fine evenings for as long as the old horse lived. The Duke of Amberton walked out to the 3rd box with his wife on his arm and stood at the half-door, while she fed Michaelmas the ends of her apple, and Lucian would watch her in the lantern light, her sleeves turned back, her chin level, laughing at something the horse had done. And he would think, every time, of a market square and a trow and a pair of folded hands, and of the 40 people who had stood and watched and said nothing. He had said something. It was the single act of his life he did not intend to apologize for. "You are staring, Your Grace," she said, without turning round. "Yes," said Lucian. "Why?" He put his hand over hers on the door, where it belonged, where it had been for years and would be for years yet. "Because they thought you were worth a horse," he said, "and there is not gold enough in England, and I am the only man in that square who knew it." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and the lantern burned on, and the beeches, too close and beautiful, and never once cut down, stood black against the last of the light.